Good morning. This is OmniView, Episode 12, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is March 11th, 2026. We'll cover what happened, how different viewpoints frame it, so you can decide for yourself. Ships attacked in Strait of Hormuz amid U.S.-Israel-Iran war, escalating global oil supply fears. Let's start with that escalating situation in the Middle East. 3 commercial ships were reportedly attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point for global oil transit, as the war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran heats up. Saudi Arabia's state oil company has issued stark warnings about potential catastrophic effects on world oil markets if these disruptions persist, and reports indicate the U.S. has responded by taking out 16 Iranian warships involved in minelaying. Iranian forces are being blamed for trying to choke off energy supplies, which has already led to fuel shortages and panic buying in places like Australia, while embassies in the region are closing for safety. Conservative outlets like those in the Daily Mail are framing these attacks as clear evidence of Iran's aggressive tactics, arguing that they demand a robust military push from the U.S. and Israel to safeguard global energy security. On the other hand, progressive voices, as seen in The Guardian, are emphasizing the humanitarian fallout and critiquing this as a perilous escalation rooted in decades of Western involvement in Middle East conflicts. Centrist takes highlight the broader economic waves, pointing out how these incidents are rippling into everyday life far from the conflict zone, and they're calling for urgent diplomatic steps to cool things down. Internationally, there's a focus on protecting civilians and citizens abroad, with Australian officials stressing the need to prioritize safety amid the chaos. What's interesting here is how the fog of war makes verifying these reports tricky, something to keep in mind. The question nobody's asking enough is, how reliable are these accounts of the ship attacks when sources are conflicting and the stakes are so high? Shifting now to a story that ties into the broader tensions with Iran, but through the lens of sports and human rights. Members of Iran's women's football team have returned home after a bold protest at the Asia Cup in Australia, where they refused to sing the national anthem, sparking warnings from Iranian officials about handling such dissent. 7 players defected and sought asylum, but others boarded flights back, with one notably changing her mind due to personal reasons, apparently after contact with the Iranian embassy revealed the group's location. Australian authorities granted humanitarian visas to some, highlighting the personal risks involved. Progressive outlets are hailing this as a brave act of resistance against oppression, linking it to ongoing women's rights struggles in Iran and commending Australia's supportive response, according to reports in the Daily Mail and The Guardian. Conservative perspectives, however, warn that these defections might encourage more anti-regime activity, potentially destabilizing the region further during the war. From a centrist and international angle, the emphasis is on the tough personal choices these athletes face, like family pressures influencing decisions, and the diplomatic strains this creates between Iran and host countries like Australia. It's a reminder of how global events can intersect with individual lives in unexpected ways. A thoughtful question to consider: what uncertainties remain about the treatment awaiting these returning players back in Iran, given the regime's history? Meanwhile, these Middle East conflicts are hitting wallets around the world, with oil prices surging amid the U.S.-Iran war developments. Prices have climbed above $92 per barrel as markets react to the ship attacks in the Strait of Hormuz and broader supply fears, leading to a 50-cent jump per gallon at U.S. gas pumps. Traders seem unmoved by talk of tapping reserves, instead fixating on the real disruptions, which are fueling panic buying in Australia and dire warnings from Saudi Arabia about long-term market chaos. Right-leaning sources like Fox News are pinning the blame on the current administration's foreign policy missteps, noting a shift in GOP rhetoric from criticizing past leaders like Biden to seeing these hikes as an unavoidable price for standing up to Iran. Left-leaning outlets, as in The Guardian, are pointing out how the war worsens economic inequality through higher fuel costs, pushing for a faster pivot to renewables to break free from oil's volatility. Centrist business analyses from CNBC underscore the interconnected global economy, showing how these events are prompting widespread consumer anxiety and calls for diversified energy strategies. The economic ripple effects are fascinating to track in real time. Here's a question worth pondering: are these current price surges purely a direct result of the war, or are other market factors playing a bigger role? Next, a warning from Ukrainian President Zelensky that's adding another layer to the geopolitical puzzle. He has cautioned that Russia might deploy troops to back Iran in its fight against the US and Israel as violence spreads across the Middle East. This comes alongside live updates on the conflict, including speculation about the health of Iran's supreme leader. From European and US international outlets, this is being portrayed as a sign of an expanding anti-Western alliance, with left-leaning views criticizing it as Russia extending its aggressive reach and pulling focus from Ukraine's own struggles, per reports in the Daily Mail and The Guardian. Conservative angles see it as proof that stronger deterrence is needed against both Russia and Iran to avoid a bigger global showdown. Centrist takes are weaving in worries about regional stability, suggesting that any Russian involvement could tangle up peace efforts and impact allies like Israel. It's a development that could reshape alliances in unpredictable ways. The question on my mind is, what evidence actually supports or refutes these claims of Russian troop movements, especially in such a fluid situation? Turning to a different kind of international intrigue, this time involving the UK and ties to a notorious figure. The UK government is set to release documents about Peter Mandelson's 2024 appointment as US ambassador, prompted by revelations of his connections to Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender. Mandelson was removed from the post last September after emails exposed the extent of their relationship, and he was arrested last month on suspicion of misconduct, though he denies any wrongdoing. Left-leaning sources like The Guardian are slamming the original appointment as a vetting failure, arguing that known Epstein links were ignored and demanding more accountability in political picks. Right-leaning outlets are focusing on the damage to UK-US relations, viewing the document release as a vital move to rebuild trust in the wake of scandals, as covered in CNBC. Centrist and international perspectives are raising ethical flags about Mandelson's denials, seeing this as part of deeper issues in elite circles that span borders. Media coverage itself is part of the story here, with calls for probes into how these files are handled. A key question to consider: how might these revelations affect transparency in UK politics moving forward? On the health policy front in the US, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is making waves by reshaping guidelines, including a revamped dietary pyramid that flips the script to emphasize red meat, whole milk, proteins, and healthy fats over the old focus on grains. This inverts long-standing recommendations and has critics calling it a dismantling of established policies. Progressive critics, as in Mother Jones, argue that these changes ignore solid nutrition science and favor industry lobbies, potentially risking public health in a broader rollback of regulations. Conservative supporters view it as a sensible pushback against overreach, championing a return to straightforward, protein-focused eating. Centrist analyses highlight the scientific debates, noting how this reflects deep political divides in how we approach health advice. It's intriguing to see how personal beliefs can influence national policy. Something to think about. What evidence really supports or challenges these new guidelines, and how might that play out in the long term? Finally, a story from the world of wellness that's raising alarms about exploitation. A woman from a privileged background has come forward saying she was coerced into working as a cam girl by tantric guru Grigorian Bivalaru, who's accused of raping and kidnapping women at his retreats. The 72-year-old was arrested in 2023 during raids in Paris that freed 26 women from dire conditions, spotlighting abuse in spiritual communities. Feminist and progressive outlets like those in the Daily Mail are framing this as a glaring case of exploitation in alternative wellness scenes, urging better regulation to shield the vulnerable. Conservative takes stress personal accountability while denouncing the crimes, positioning it as a warning against unchecked spiritual groups. International views note the global reach of such cults, exploring how even privilege doesn't always protect against these traps. The human stories behind these headlines are often the most compelling. A thoughtful question: how can spiritual retreats be better regulated to prevent such exploitation without stifling genuine practices? Before we go, tomorrow, watch for updates on the speculation surrounding Iran's new supreme leader's health, as it could shift the dynamics of the ongoing war. That's Omni View. For full source links and more context, check out today's written briefing on the Omni View summaries page. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow.
Without taking the dive, we went on vacation. We had a nice time. My doomsday is set for the 4th of They'll try and convince